Joining us now, the GOP's point man in the debate, House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan, who comes to us from his home state of Wisconsin. Congressman, as we say, President Obama presents his budget for 2012 tomorrow, and he reportedly is going to offer a plan that would cut the deficit, his aides say, by $1 trillion over the next decade. The key features a 5-year freeze on spending and some considerable tax increases on the wealthy. From what you've heard, what do you think of the president's plan?
It sounds like the similar budgets that he's been giving us last couple of years. Last year, he gave us a $2 trillion tax increase. He got $700 billion of those tax increases enacted, mostly through his health care law. It looks like he's coming back for another, $1.3 trillion in tax increases. This discretionary freeze is off of an extremely high base. They just blew spending out the gates in the last 2 years. A 24% increase in domestic discretionary spending. When you throw stimulus on top, it was an 84% increase. And he wants to freeze for a few years off of those high levels. It's less than 1% of spending over the next 10 years. So, we'll see the details of this budget tomorrow, but it looks like to me that it's going to be very small on spending discipline and a lot of new spending, so-called investments. Look, the president is elected to lead and to face the country's biggest challenges. The country's biggest challenge, domestically speaking, no doubt about it, is a debt crisis. And I'm really hoping that he's going to give us a budget that tackles this debt crisis. And if it's what these early press reports show, it shows that he's abdicating leadership on that point. I'm hoping that that's not the case, that we can get this debt going down. But it looks like the debt's going to continue rising under this budget.
Well, if it is as it's been reported, and there's every reason to believe it, these are leaks from the White House, is this budget, which has some spending increases for infrastructure and education and research, is this budget, the president's budget, dead on arrival?
Well, look, I don't like to say that until I actually see the budget. So, I wish I could give you a clean, clear answer. But again, I want to look at the actual budget. We will get this tomorrow. We will pour through it line by line very quickly. We know how to analyze these things pretty quickly. And then we'll give you an answer to that tomorrow. But look, if he's talking about coming and having new spending, so-called investments, that is not where we're going. The great debate we're having in Congress now, which is refreshing, is we're debating how much to cut spending, not how much to increase spending. And these early press reports are showing us that he wants paltry savings on the one hand and a lot of new spending on the other hand. Borrowing and spending is not the way to prosperity. Today's deficits means tomorrow's tax increases, and that costs jobs. So all this borrowing and spending doesn't work, didn't work with the stimulus, and it will cost us jobs. We need to cut spending so we can keep taxes and interest rates low so businesses can plan and hire people.
But Congressman, a number of business leaders, including Tom Donahue, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, say that the economy needs some, not a net, but some new investments. He talks particularly about infrastructure to create jobs. There are a number of independent economists out there that say that if you have too many cuts too quickly when the economy is so weak, that's going to hurt the recovery. Let me ask you specifically, and we're going to get to the details of your budget in a minute, but how do all of these spending cuts create jobs in the short term, in the next year?
Ben Bernanke came to our committee a few days ago and said, if you guys put in place a real plan to get the deficit under control, that will help the economy now, because that sends the signals to the markets, to the small businesses, men and women of America, that my taxes aren't going to have to pay for all this borrowing, that interest rates are going to be low. So getting spending under control today gives confidence for tomorrow, and that leads to more hiring and job creation. Look, I am not worried about Washington cutting too much spending too fast. I mean, the kinds of spending cuts we're talking about just right now are $100 billion out of a $3.7 trillion budget. So I am not concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is endless borrowing, which is going to compromise our economy not only today but in the future, because we know the decisions we make right now really dramatically impact us in the future, and the debt is literally getting out of our control. And if we bring a budget that continues to send the debt out of control, that today hurts the economy. So spending cuts, yes, in fact, help us with jobs today.
All right. Congressman, this gets a little confusing. The president is going to be offering a budget for the next budget year that starts in October 2012. This week, right, you guys, the House Republicans, are going to offer some cuts in the current budget, the 2011 fiscal budget, for the next 7 months that are still left in it. You originally, as the House budget chairman, proposed roughly $30 billion in cuts from 2010 spending. And under pressure from House Tea Party members, the freshmen, the young guns, That was doubled to $60 billion. Do any of these cuts, double what you originally proposed, do any of them go too far?
No, no. Look, how great is this debate we're having in Congress? A year ago, Congress was debating about how much more spending to increase. Now we're debating about how much more spending to cut. What I put that number out there, that was the pledge, which said we will bring spending down to '08 levels for the rest of the fiscal year. Given that the Democrats spent half the money already, you don't get as much savings. Our members wanted to go back and get those savings. So they wanted to get a year's worth of savings for the rest of the fiscal year. That's fantastic. I think that's a great debate to be having. And it is showing that we are serious about fiscal discipline. And if we can show that we are serious about fiscal discipline, that will actually help the economy today. That will tell businesses that we're serious about getting this debt and deficit under control so they don't have to panic and worry about tomorrow's taxes and interest rates.
Well, let's get specific, because the Democrats say, look, it's very easy to talk about a big number, very easy to talk about a percentage, but let's get into some specific programs and what House Republicans are going to be offering this week. Let's look at the cuts. $3 billion from the Environmental Protection Agency, $2 billion in the middle of a recession from job training, $600 million from border security and immigration enforcement, $1.6 billion from the National Institutes of Health, and $500 million from the COPS program, which puts more police on the streets. Congressman, when it gets down to those specifics, are you willing to defend all of those cuts?
Yes, because last year, these agencies got double and triple digit spending increases. You throw the stimulus in there, EPA got a triple digit spending increase. Look, if borrowing and spending was the way to create jobs, we would be at full employment. We're not. We have high unemployment. And so last year, at the end of the fiscal year, the government had $1.4 trillion in leftover money. We call that unobligated spending. We don't even know how much more. They have thrown so much money at these bureaucracies that in a full fiscal year, they can't even spend all of the money. So unobligated balances, which is a fancy way of saying they can't even spend all of this money, we anticipate the same thing again. We cannot continue down this path of having double and triple digit spending increases on government agencies. No matter how popular sounding these programs are, they mortgage our children's future and they compromise our economic growth today. We just don't buy into this neo-Keynesian belief that you got to borrow and spend more money today to try and create jobs. We've got to have jobs in the private sector grow, not jobs in the public sector, because every time we borrow more money from the Chinese or whoever, we're taking money out of the private sector, and that is costing us jobs. This is about prosperity and economic growth, and yes, we want to put the brakes on spending in Washington, and I'm excited about the new culture we have in the House of Representatives, which is spending levels are now ceilings and not floors, and we're going to debate how much more we want to bring spending down, and that is a good dynamic to have.
Having said all of that, everything that we've talked about, Congressman, is non-defense discretionary spending, which is a very small piece of the total pie. We're talking about only 15% of the total federal budget.
That's right.
And if you really want to get where the money is, as Willie Sutton said about banks, you've got to talk about entitlement, Social Security, and Medicare, and Medicaid, which is 40% of the federal budget. Are you going to, can you pledge right now that you will address those issues and make serious cuts in them in the 2012 budget starting next October?
Well, you're right about that. Right now, we're dealing with just discretionary for the rest of the fiscal year, and in FY12, we deal with all of those things. As the budget chairman, I have to get consensus with my conference. We have 87 new people, and quite frankly, I want to hear the perspective of these new members because they come from great and diverse backgrounds from around the country. So we will be going forward in consensus. We can't even start writing a budget until March when we get our baseline from CBO. I'm excited to see what the president's budget does tomorrow, because if the president's budget ignores those programs you're talking about, that means he is advocating leadership on dealing with this entitlement crisis. I can't tell you what our new budget's going to look like. I can't tell you what the budget's going to look like because I don't have a baseline yet.
Aren't you? You guys are doing it too.
We haven't even written the budget yet. We haven't even been able to write our budget yet. Every time I brought budgets to the floor the last couple of years, we've been dealing with those programs. We've been talking about reforming those programs. Look, the president not only didn't deal with these programs, which are the drivers of our debt, he punted to a fiscal commission, and then he didn't even embrace the fiscal commission. So if the president
you voted
of the
against
United
it. You
States
were on the fiscal commission and you voted against it yourself.
I did, and I proposed alternatives. The reason I voted against the fiscal commission because it didn't deal with the driver, which is health care spending. Ellis Rivlin and I, a Democrat, proposed real significant health care entitlement reform. It was not accepted by the fiscal commission, and that is in large part why I didn't support it.
Here's the
but the point I'm trying to say is
Well, if I may just ask the question, and you can answer it in the course of this. It sounds like and let's face it, there's a certain game going on here. The White House is scared to go first on entitlements because they say that the Republicans will demagogue them. The Republicans say they're scared to go first on entitlements because they think the Democrats will demagogue them. When are we going to get some progress on entitlements?
Two things. Number one, presidents are elected to lead, not to punt. And this president has been punting. And I sincerely hope he leads with the budget tomorrow. I can't tell you what our budget's going to look like yet because I don't even have a baseline with which to write one yet. We haven't even gotten consensus in our caucus yet. But if you want to take a look at the kinds of things we've been proposing lately, I have consistently introduced legislation and brought budgets to the floor that does address the drivers of our deficit and debt, which is the entitlements. So we expect and hope the president will actually lead on this crisis, this debt crisis, and preempt it. Everybody knows the sooner you deal with this, the better off everybody is. And if the president doesn't want to lead on entitlements, then he's not leading. And we do hope and plan on dealing with these issues. But I cannot tell you exactly what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, because quite literally we haven't been able to reach consensus with each other yet because we don't even have a baseline with which to write a budget yet.
Congressman,
that's what comes in April.
Congressman, we got a little bit more than a minute left. I want to talk because obviously there's a deadline here, and that is that the continuing resolution runs out on March 4th. There are some, even Republicans, who say it's all well and good to have not your cuts, the $30 billion, but these steeper cuts. But in fact, you're getting further away from a possible deal with the Democrats and with the White House. When you have these steeper cuts, you're making it easier for them to say no. That's the contention. The question I have is, what happens when the continuing resolution runs out if there is no deal on March 4th? And would you accept a short continuing resolution to keep the government running while you try to work out a deal?
I think that's a very viable possibility, our short-term extensions, while we work out a compromise. But look, we're not interested in rubber stamping big government. We're not interested in accepting these extremely high levels of spending. We're serious about spending. That's the driver of our deficit and debt. We want to get spending down. And what's interesting is we're going to let an open rule process, unlike the way Nancy Pelosi ran Congress the last 4 years. Any member of Congress can bring any amendment to the floor to readjust spending levels however they want to readjust these issues if they want to add spending or take away spending. So we're going to let Congress work its will. And Congress right now wants to bring spending down below where President Obama wants to take it. And we're going to have to negotiate.
We're going to have to leave it there. Congressman Ryan, we want to thank you so much for coming in and joining us today. It should be a big week on Capitol Hill, and we'll stay on top of it, sir.
Great. Thanks, Chris.